Welcome to the Modern Application Development 2 screencast. In this screencast, we'll see how to separate the front-end and back-end application and how do we go about deploying it and what are the complexities involved and what are the advantages. Let me just explain how it's going to be set up. Assume we have a front-end app, we have a back-end app, right? And let's say our front-end app is a Flask app and it just has APIs, right? Just the RESTful APIs. And this is a backend app written in Vue, right? And when it's deployed, let's assume these two run on different domains, or it could even be that you are building just a front-end app and someone else is built and delivering the backend app. For example, you are using a third-party APIs. Then the backend APIs becomes a completely different domain, right? It's similar to that in terms of concept. For example, this could be on api.example.com, and this could be at example.com. For all practical purposes, they are different domains. So they will have different security settings in terms of cookie sharing, costs, etc. We'll see how to handle that, how to deploy that, in a simpler way, and how they interact. Now, this is not backend. This is frontend, right? And this is the backend. Just to be clear. Okay, so and then they interact between those using APIs, right? So using APIs and using auth tokens, right? Authentication using auth tokens, because they are not on the same server. They can't use cookie authentication. And usually in such cases, there is no server-side rendering. All the rendering happens on the front end, and the backend's job is just to send the data to the front end like a JSON in our case, and then the front end should take care of everything. Now, this front end app in Vue could be, based on regular simple HTML Vue JavaScript one, or it could be a app built using CLI or Node.js, right? It can be any of those. We'll see both of them just as an example and see how to go about doing it. Here, I've already set up the project similar to our regular project. I've put our Python application in the backend code and a simple Vue app in the front end code. Doesn't do anything special, just as an app, and imports a component called hello world, and hello world just print HW. We can just run this without backend because currently it's not using any backend, and then when it uses, we'll see how to use it, right? We are in the folder called source because it's in the source folder. Currently we are not going to build it, we're just going to run it, right? So we're going to run it using vue command line to see what all the features available. We can do vue help. We're going to use this vue serve main dot. Our main code is in main, so vue dot main. Okay. Vue serve. No, we are not going to build. We're just going to serve. Okay. Okay. So let's start this. Let's see what port it starts. So it's pulling out and building all the things that is required to so, and it will start a dev server. Might take a couple of minutes because it's first time it takes time to download the packages and build and all of those. So let's go to 8080. Okay, local host 8080. Okay, so you can see that it's doing HW. Now we want to do something. Instead of printing the message, hard-coded message, we want to pull this message from the backend, right? We'll do that. First, let's run the backend and see whether the API is returning the message. I'm going to stop this. I'm going to the backend code. I've done already the local setup. So sh local run. Oh, this is also running 8080, so we'll run the front end in a different port. Anyway, I'm going to open 8080 and open our simple API that we had done earlier for testing called test API, right? Which I'm just going to initially comment out the authentication just to check whether it's working. So it should print hello world from test API, right? If I access, and the path would be, it will be /API/test, right? Let's go here. Local host /API/test. It's not 8000, it is 8080. It seems to be returning hello world test API, right? I'm going to close this and restart our front-end application. When I restart now, it will start on a different port because port 8080 is already occupied by our backend. So it's building. Give it a second. Okay, it's running on 8081. Copy link. Now I'll paste this here. See, it's doing HW. Now I want from this URL call this API to show this message on this. We know that's pretty straightforward, right? We can go to our app and go to this component, and we can just on mount we can call the API and set the data, right? If you see the API response, the message is inside a key message. Okay, so if I do mounted on mount, this is a lifecycle function. Mount, it will call this API, which is localhost 8080 API test. When it returns data, I want this dot message to be the message, right? It's closed. Okay, so now when I go refresh, okay, it's just an extra bracket. Okay, now we can see it's come from hello world from test API, right? So it's calling localhost 8080 from 8081 and calling that, right? Let's see what else we have done. We have done one more step here to do something called course. Course is you can search for course. MDN course. So it's a way of sharing the resources across origin or like across the domains, right? You can read about that. Now, origin in this website is 8081, but it's trying to access from here. It's trying to call to 8080 API. So that's across the origin, a different domain. So it will throw an error if you don't allow on the server side. To allow on the server side, you have to import course and then add app to course. You can read more about that here. You can actually enable it to specific domains. Now currently we have, by doing this, we have enabled from any other domain can I call this API through the browser without any restrictions. Usually we don't do that. It's not very secure. If you know that your app is running on a specific domain, your front-end app is running on a separate specific domain, we only allow requests from that domain. So we can do that specific domain, allocation. You can do this origins. Instead of star, you can tell specific. Now what happens if I had not done this, right? Let's say I will mask this. Let's see what happens. I'll just restart if it's not okay. let's go back to our and refresh this. So it's not done the thing. Got the message from the backend. You can check the console here to see what's happening. You can see that cross region request blocked. Same urgent policy disallows reading of the remote resource at that location from here, right? That's why it's not getting data, and hence it's not refreshing. Now, as soon as I add this back, right, and then refresh, this goes away. I've been able to access, you can see that I've been able to access that Ajax request, and then I've been able to access, get the message and show the message. This is very important to understand. Similarly, if authentication was enabled, you couldn't use the cookie, you have to use the token. Let's check. So let's go back to where our API, and if I enable this auth token, right, then in my call to the API, I have to set up credential and send the auth token in the header, etc., etc. I've shown that how to do that in a separate screencast. You can have a look at how to do that. So this is how it's usually done. This has advantage here, like you have two separate projects. Some front end team can work on the front end, back end team can work on the back end, and it can be kept separate. And the same back end can be used by, say, front end code which is for web, and also an Android or an iOS app. So the same backend code can be used, or APIs can be used by both. So it kind of keeps them separate. If the front end code becomes big and large, so it's a separate project, it can be maintained well. Now, while deploying, it's not that you always have to deploy it separately, right? Like the way we saw here, it doesn't have to be always. You can always build this, push it as part of a static here, and serve it, right? So let's see that. Let's build it. Okay. Let's say view help, and then there'll be view build, right? View build and main.js. So now it's going to build and create a distribution folder for the production deployment. Usually this is how you do. You don't run it. That was a development server. Okay, it might take a couple of minutes when you build it for the first time. Okay, it's done. So everything is inside the dist folder. Now when you're deploying it, if it was a separate setup, in the sense if you're going for the same thing, there would have been a server running here, right? It would have been Python 3. I'm going to start simple HTTP server minus a http.server. So it's running at 8000. Okay, so copy link. Oh, it's not localhost. Should be fine. Let's see. Okay, let's see console. Okay, something is wrong with the backend. It's throwing some error. Let's check whether our backend server is running. It's not running. Okay, it is running Only problem is we had enabled the auth. So I'm just going to mask it for one more second. Okay, go back, localhost 8080 API test. Okay, so now I'm going to close this as well. If I run this, got the value, it's running. So it's again running on a different port. But now you could also make this run through the Flask by copying this dist folder into the static folder, right? That's always a possibility. For example, let's say I'm going to go back to the front end source. There's a dist folder, right? This is the dist folder. Copy it. Going to come back here. Backend code. Instead of static, I'm going to put dist directly and change in my Flask. Flask has an option to change the static folder, right? And static folder URI path. So we can just do that when you're instantiating the static folder. Okay, let's go back to main. Okay, templates folder is templates. Static folder is dist. Okay, now let's start our Flask app. Not required to restart this because we don't need to run this anymore. We are just going to run only one. Okay, start with the leading slash. Yeah, okay. Cool. Now if I go to 8080, okay, we're going to slash, but we have to go to dist. Right, it's loading, but it's not relatively loading the other, other files. Let's say the CSS is not going to CSS because it's going to slash CSS and not slash dist slash CSS. So you might have to make those changes. Basically, what you could do is instead of adding it to dist, you can remove this and it can still keep it in static, and you can put an index and route the thing to the index file, right? And there is one more thing that you might have to do if you change that, which is setting the path. Let me just get you the name of it. It's called public path. So this is what you have to do while building. If you are going to use a separate path, which is not a dist path, because it assumes that you're going to be serving from here, but if you're not, then you'll have to give the specific path. Here we are actually serving from dist, so that's why. But you could make it also simpler. Okay, let's do that. Let's say in the source we can change the config to do dist path, and let's build that again, right? We can just add a view config. New file. Okay, and then we can just So let's not call it dist in our thing. Let's call it app just to be nicer. Okay. It's not for production. We'll just remove this for now. It will be app. Okay. So I'll make a similar change in the main. Even though it is dist folder, we'll call it app. Okay. Now let's stop this. I'm going to delete this old dist. I'm going to rebuild this that settings change. Oh, okay. Rebuilding. Now it will build with this setting of view config where we are telling it that we are serving from /app. Okay, it's built. Now I'm going to go back from frontend source and dist. I'm going to go to backend, paste it here so that I can serve it as part of Flask. Now I'm going to start the Flask app again. Okay, now let's see, localhost 8000 app. Is it 8000 or 880? Okay, let's see, app is correct here, app is correct here, dist is okay, it has to be index. So it's working, like otherwise you could also do like a forwarding using the main.controller. For example, here instead of doing this, after this you can just do let's do an HTML forward. What is in our controllers? Instead of /routing to there, we can actually forward it to the redirect to the other path. You can use a redirect. Oh. Yeah, okay. Okay, this is what you can do. You can redirect to /app/index.html. Just try it once. Let's see. I'm just going to remove all of these. Okay, called def app. Just redirecting to /app/index.html. Right, let's see. Let's restart. Oh, I can't call it app because let's say view app, because app is already defined variable. Okay, it's running. Now if I go to /, it should redirect me to that, and localhost 8080. Okay, Redirect is not defined. I just have to import redirect. There you go. So now it's working. It got forwarded. It's working. Now again, like there are two parts, right? If I was running separately, it gives an opportunity to not only code by separate, but also running and deployment separate. So you one like since Vue app front end app is completely static, you can deploy it on a CDN, which is super fast, and you can run the backend on a Flask on a separate server. So code is separate and deployment is also separate. In the second case, code is separate. You're coding separately, but at the time of deployment, what we'll do is we'll deploy only one, which will copy from dist into the Flask and then use it. In this case, it gives an advantage of it's on the same server, so cookies can be used. But if you deploy separately, you can use it. You have to use auth tokens. Right. There is also a piece of code that I had written in the standard way. You don't have to use Vue CLI to do all of that. You could also, simply write like a HTML and you can start a server and call it. And even that should work, right? Let me just show that also. Let me just stop. This is stopped. Okay, let this run because we want the API. API is accessible. Now instead of calling 8080, I'll call, I'll start another server in the code part 2. This is all simple static server. Python 3 -m http dot server. Now we don't have any build process, anything here. It's just a simple HTML and we're just running it. Right? Call host 8000. It just shows hello world, nothing special because that's what we have written here. Just hello world. Now you can go ahead and attach the same similar mounted thing to load it from the remote. Okay, this ends here. Okay. Okay, and now I just have to refresh and I should get the message from the remote server and I should be able to load it and run it. Here the difference is this is like doesn't use any JavaScript or like a Node.js thing or CLI or anything. This can be still put into a separate project and can be actually deployed separately, just like how we deployed the other one. So both regular simple apps with using just the HTML and JavaScript can also be deployed in a similar way. Or if you use Vue CLI also, you can deploy it that way, or you can combine two. So that's all. Actually, we have seen all methods now in a complex way of deployment structures, but in really big applications and big teams, usually they try to keep both deployment and code separate, right? And based on the complexity of the front end, they could use CLI or just use HTML and JavaScript. That's again left to developer's choice. So these are the other set of architecting your app, structuring your code, and deploying your code. Thank you for watching.